Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to create a faded sepia look using Luminar AI. Hello and welcome to Luminar Coffee Break. I'm your host Angela Andrieux, and today we are going to be making a faded sepia image using Luminar AI. I want to say hello to Russell and to everyone who's watching. Merry Christmas. You can see that I'm feeling very festive today. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. So on the screen, I have the after image. This is a photo I captured in Smithfield, Virginia, in a really cool place called Windsor Castle Park. And there's this old farmstead on the property. And this is the before image. And this is my after. I'm going to show you how I did it. So I'm going to begin by right-clicking on the image, going to adjustments, and reverting to the original. Hello, bonsoir, Joseph. Good to see you. All right, so from here, I'm going to start with Enhance AI. And we're going to pull up our Enhance AI just a little bit. And you'll notice this is popping the colors a little bit. Mostly what I'm going for is an adjustment to my tones. So bringing down of the highlights, bringing up of the shadows, and adding a little bit of contrast. The color is not so important in this particular image. Hey, Julie, good to see you. All right, so next we're going to go down to our toning tool. And this is where we get to start being creative. What I want to do today is add a sepia tone to a color image. Now, typically when we add a sepia tone, it's typically to a black and white image, or at least that's what I think most people think of. But you can also apply that kind of toning to a color image. What you typically want to do is mute those colors a little bit and then add a tone, a warmth to the entire image. So we're going to begin here in the toning tool with highlights. I'm going to bring up the saturation, and I'm going to move my hue slider to a warm brown tone. So right about there I think is good, maybe even a little bit further. No, it's getting a little too green. I'm going to bring that back down, maybe right about 35. And now I'm going to do the same thing with our shadows. I'm going to bring up my saturation right about there, and then bring my hue to approximately the same value. So let's say 35. If you were using two different values for like a duotone effect, that's where you might want to go down to your balance and see if you want to weight more towards your shadows or your highlights. But in this instance, balance isn't really necessary because we're using the same color overtone in both our shadows and our highlights. Now we can adjust that amount and apply the amount of that color overlay that we like. So I think right about there looks good. Now, as I look at this, some of the original colors to me are still a little bit too strong. We have the greens down here, and I want to do something with the sky. There's nothing visually interesting happening up here. So I think what I want to do is add a cloud. Now you might think maybe do a full-on sky replacement. In this instance, I don't really think that's necessary. That using Augmented Sky AI just to pop a cloud in there is a better choice. So I'm going to go to the Augmented Sky AI tool, go to my object selection, and let's just choose this first cloud here. And you'll notice that pops a cloud right there into the sky. So I'm going to click out of that cloud selection, and we can adjust the amount. We can change the warmth. We can even relight it so it matches the scene a little bit better. That's actually much nicer. We can also choose place object, and this allows us to scale and move that cloud wherever we want. So I think right about there looks pretty good. Click the place object button again to commit that placement and go down into the advanced settings. And this is what's really important here. So if you notice that this is a very shallow depth of field image. My subject is crisp and in focus, and the background is nice and blurred. So I want to make sure that cloud, because it's part of the background, has that same level of blur as the rest of the background. Otherwise, it looks very artificial. So we'll grab that defocus slider, and we're going to bring that up substantially so that cloud just kind of fades into the background of the image. We can then back off the amount and just give a little bit of additional visual interest in the sky. So to me, that's a lot more interesting than having nothing there. It really changes the image just putting a cloud there. Hey, Walter. Hey, Harry. Good to see you both. So glad you're able to make it. And again, Merry Christmas to everybody. All right, so now let's work with the colors and bring those down a little bit. To me, it's still a little bit strong. And the overall image, I think, might be a little bit too bright as well. So let's address the brightness first. I'm going to go to the light tool, and just ever so slightly bring down that exposure, not too much, and then I'm going to bring down those highlights. And you can see that adds a bit of extra drama to the photo. And now we can go to color and address some of the colors here. Now, when you're going for that vintage look, making the image a little bit faded and fading that color back really makes this look more convincing. And you'll see that makes a tremendous difference. Now we can go into our HSL and start working with some of these individual colors. I'm going to click first into the hue, and our yellows, especially the yellows in the grass, are strong. I want to move that yellow slider more towards the orange, and look how that adds a bit of richness to the image. I'm going to put that right about there. And now we can go to our saturation and maybe back off some of the yellow. That looks really, really good. And I might go into my luminance. The sky right now feels a little bit too bright. And we know there's a lot of blue tones in there, even though we desaturated them. So I am going to go down to my blue. Oops, sorry about that. It looks like I just launched my colorimeter for my monitor on accident. Sorry about that. I'm going to pull down the blues and just darken down that sky a little bit for a bit more drama. All right, so this is looking really, really good. There's just a couple of extra things I want to do to finish this off. One, I think I want to crop this in because this foreground is a little bit bright and it's not doing much to enhance the photo. I also want to add a big soft vignette that will draw us further into this headstone. So let's start with the crop. I'm going to go up to Composition AI. And for this particular image, I think a 4x5 crop will work well. Maybe right about there. And that just takes some of the foreground out of there and draws us in more to the subject. I'll hit return on my keyboard there to go ahead and commit that. And now we can add our vignette. I'm going to bring the amount slider all the way down to -100. I do that so I can see what's being darkened. Eventually, I will pull that back up to a more natural level. But in case it's worrying you that this is way too dark, don't worry, I'm going to change that. I'm also going to bring the size down. And I'm wanting to make that size roughly the size and shape of this headstone. I'll then go into advanced settings. I'm going to add a tiny bit of inner light. I'm going to bring that feather up nice and high, and you'll see how that's making that transition between the inner and outer portions of the vignette very, very soft and gradual. And now I'm going to click on Choose Subject and move this over to where this headstone is right in the middle of that vignette. Now that we have it placed, we can take that amount slider and back it off and get that placed exactly where we want it. And you want to be careful because you see as I pull this in closer, that vignette starts to become pretty obvious. We don't want an obvious vignette. We just want a slight darkening of those edges to draw us in. So this is what it does. Here's the before vignette and the after. If you feel like any other areas still need to be darkened down a little bit, you can always go into your dodge and burn tool, darken those down. I prefer to use local masking and go to add and basic. And this allows me to get my brush, but instead of just lightening and darkening pixels, I have a variety of different options here. For now, I'm going to pull that exposure down a little bit further. I'm going to pull the opacity of my brush down to about 50%, maybe a little bit more than that there. And use the bracket keys on my keyboard, make that a bit bigger, and just maybe brush in a little bit more of that darkness across there, and maybe in behind there, and right there. And I think that just finishes it off and gives it a really refined look. Now, as you look at this, if you feel like it went a bit overboard, you can always go down here to the overall amount slider at the bottom right corner, back that off a little bit, and that changes it back toward the original image. I like it kind of full strength. I think as I look at this, this is how my mind works as I go through and I edit. I make these little incremental changes and my picture develops as I'm developing it. So I'm looking at this, I feel like the toning might still be a little bit strong. So I can always click back to my tools, back to the toning tool, and just pull back on that toning a little bit. And there we have it. That is my finished image. So I hope you guys like it and got some creative and fun ideas out of it. I want to wish you guys all a very, very Merry Christmas. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you give us a thumbs up here on YouTube. And if you have any questions, pop them into the comments below. I'll do my best to get those answered for you. I want to wish you guys, like I said, a very Merry Christmas, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.